You're listening to the Downeast Mike podcast, the quirky little podcast from Maine. And now, your host, Downeast Mike. Dee-dee-dle-weedle, dee-dee. Good morning, everybody. This is Downeast Mike. Welcome to the Downeast Mike podcast. We do this several times a week, or as the mood hits us, we do a little podcast where we talk about things of old and things of today, and then we look at how they haven't really changed all that much. You look at the headlines of yesterday and today, and they pretty much line up. You just have to change the date. Today is Saturday, October 22nd, 2022, and we are located in Downeast, Maine, way down east in a part of Maine that is seldom visited, very low population density, just a few people per mile, not too many neighbors, and it's really quiet here most of the time, except for the occasional logging truck that rumbles by. Not much happens, but we live our lives out through the internet. We just sit and look at the world through that distorted lens of internetism. We should start off with our motto today. Some of this is whimsy, some of it's true, and the interpretation of it all is entirely up to you. In today's episode, we have the worst inflation in 25 years, and that's from 1974. The electric car will solve problems. That's from 1974. There's a Fall River antifreeze riot. You'll not want to miss that exciting story. That was in 1974. Then the Lewiston cops were chasing a pig in 1902. I could have played games with that headline, but I didn't. I thought that was too easy. We should look at the world headlines before we dive into our podcast. Federal judge just temporarily paused Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. Former Chinese leader Hu Jintao unexpectedly let out of room as Communist Party Congress comes to an end. Now, if you were a former Chinese leader, premier, and they were having the big party, the big Congress party, and at the very end of it, someone tapped you on the shoulder and led you out of the room, what do you think the chances are of you seeing daylight again? Probably not too good. Biden appears to zone out when asked what the wife thinks about him running again in 2024. Plane crashes into New Hampshire apartments, killing everyone on board. That happened in Keene, New Hampshire. I think I used to live in an apartment right near there. And it's a miracle that nobody in the apartments was killed. It's sad for the people on the plane, but apparently they caught a wingtip as they hit some trees at the end of the runway. Venezuelans expelled from the U.S. decide the next steps in Mexico. Boy, that's a boondoggle. Pfizer says the COVID-19 vaccine will cost $110 to $130 per dose when the U.S. stops paying. You could put it on your credit card. College football player killed while riding an electric scooter. That's enough of the world headlines. Let's look at some headlines from Maine specifically. Let's see if there's anything of note here that's not already covered in the national headlines. We're pulling that up on the computer here. Gardner man confessed to robbery of the Augusta Bank. Unemployment in Maine is ticking back up after summer low. Winslow-based Standard Waterproofing acquires New England Fireproofing. So you can get waterproofed and fireproofed at the same time. It's great they brought them under the same umbrella. Exclusive MDI properties getting $12 million in upgrades. That's nice. Massachusetts man dies in a single-vehicle interstate crash in Pittsfield. They have a lot of bad accidents there. I think it's when people start ramping up their speed. A fundraiser held for a new Bucksport skate park. Bucksport is on the rise. And speaking of rising, the Maine hospitals see a rise in RSV, and it's hitting earlier than expected. RSV is a respiratory illness. Let's go to our stories here. Let's look at, we don't need to do the mammal in a moment. And we're skipping word of the day. Birthdays are coming up in a little bit because we're saving the birthdays for later. All right, from 1974, this day, October 22nd, 1974, the headlines in the newspaper were, cost of living jumps another 1.2%. Food, clothing, mortgage rates push the September climb. It jumps 12 months, the 12 months worst inflationary surge in more than 25 years. That's just like today. Rising prices for food, clothing, and mortgage rates push the cost of living up another 1.2% in September, making it the last 12 months the worst in 25 years. We heard that. This would be the worst since 1947. The purchasing power of the average worker increased slightly for the first time in 3 months. And real spendable earnings, that is the weekly pay adjusted for inflation and taxes, rose 0.1% in September, but was still at the lowest level since December 1970. With the exception of fresh fruits and vegetables, all major food categories went up last month, pushing grocery prices 1.5% higher over the month to a level 10% above a year ago. And then kind of break it down from there. It meant that it cost $151 to buy a variety of goods and services that cost $100 in 1967. We had a weather forecast from this day in 1974. They had weather then too, just like today. Southwest interior and west coastal was fair tonight. Lows 35 to 40, variable cloudiness, with a highs 55 to 60. Probability of precipitation 10%. The winds out of the southwest 5 to 15 miles per hour tonight. It could be the same forecast today, but we'll find out. We found a little editorial here, commentary from Paul Harvey. Good day. Remember Paul Harvey? The electric car will solve problems. I see the first ad for an electric car. It's on page 5 of the Wall Street Journal. It's a little bitty ad, 3 inches of one column, but it says the electric car is here. Immediate delivery, $2,390. This has to be the wave of the future. Breathing may be hazardous to your health even if you don't smoke. The American Medical Association's journal reports research revealing that nearly half of Americans have more than a safe amount of deadly carbon monoxide in their blood. If you smoke, the hazard is multiplied 3 times. Somewhere he's tying this into the electric car. But even for non-smokers in cities, automobile exhaust creates a continuing hazard. The only way to clean the air of our nation's cities is to get people to park their cars. The gasoline-powered motor car is becoming more of a liability than an asset. A substantial portion of the higher prices we're paying for new cars relates to anti-pollution equipment, which is only so effective and which, in fact, requires that we burn more fuel per mile. That depollution effort is counterproductive. Our nation's red ink balance of payments with other nations and our stateside inflation are desperately worsened by higher international prices for oil and its derivatives. Yet, while bureaucrats sit around chewing their fingernails, do you think they really do that? Chewing their fingernails past the second knuckle, trying to figure out how to get more oil, to make more gas, to run more cars, that compounds our problems. 6 manufacturers around the U.S. with little encouragement and no money from Washington are tediously hand-making our nation's first modern electric cars. Heretofore, the electric car has been disadvantaged by the limited usefulness of available batteries. No longer. High-performance batteries have been developed at the Argonne National Lab, which will multiply the power potential. Technically, the energy density of these new lithium-sulfur type batteries is 5 to 8 times greater than conventional lead-acid battery, which, as we know, the lead-acid battery is still very much in use. Practically, what this means is that the new generation of electric cars will have the acceleration and speed capability of a present conventional compact. The electric car will go 100 miles without recharging. The first of these batteries will cost $800 but will last for 5 years, so that with overnight recharging, you will drive your electric car at a fuel cost of about 1 cent per mile. With some enthusiasm from on high, the pace of this evolution could be accelerated, but even without outside help, the fledgling industry is marketing cars now and will have available these improved performance batteries or something better within 4 years. So by 1978, according to Paul Harvey, we'd all be driving electric cars, but it didn't happen. Well, there was an antifreeze riot in Fall River, Mass. This day, 1974. An antifreeze sale brought 1,000 customers into the apartment store where they pulled down displays and injured an employee. Now today they riot over big screen TVs, but in 1974 it was over antifreeze. The line at the Zare department store started at 8 a.m. and at 9:30 when the doors were open, the crowd pushed, shoved, and kicked its way through the store, according to witnesses. The store was selling antifreeze, which has been in short supply, for $3.99, $2 under the usual price. They tore the store apart, said Joseph Medeiros, the automotive manager. The automotive section is a shambles. Traffic was tied up outside the store. Dominic Verducci, the store manager, said monetary damage was slight. Rioting over antifreeze. Hunters at this time, 1974, were hunting for scarce guns and ammo. Sporting goods dealers across the country reported shortages of rifles, shotguns, and ammunition. The shortages resulted from limited supplies of steel for gun barrels. There were a shortage of choice woods for rifle stocks and plastic and brass for cartridge cases. In other words, they were out of everything. With the hunting season about to start in many states, gun dealers from Maine to the Mexican border are looking at thinly stocked rifle cases and ammo bins. There's a shortage of everything popular, said David Gills of Coast to Coast Stores in Fargo, North Dakota. And the price of ammunition was out of sight. Here was an ad from 1974 from Androscoggin Savings Bank. How to keep your heating bills from going through the roof, the walls, the windows, the doors, the fireplace, the garage, the floors, and they go on and on. Fix up your home for winter with a housewarming home improvement loan from Androscoggin Bank. With the prospect of a hard winter and high fuel costs ahead, we are giving top priority to loans of this type. If your house could use additional insulation, weather stripping, storm windows, a new furnace, or whatever, you could use our money now. Make a wise and simple investment that will cut down your fuel consumption and heating bills and increase the value of your home, an investment that pays for itself. Come see us about a home improvement loan today. What was on TV in 1974 on this day? Hawaii Five-0. McGarrett, Jack Lord, steps in when powerful Hawaiian cattle baron Colonel J.J. Faraday, who was Leslie Nielsen, makes his own laws to avenge the beating death of his son in We Hang Our Own. Faraday and his Hawaiian cowboys ready a hanging tree when elder son Jay claims his younger brother was slain by a jealous husband following a bar fight over a local girl. There is a lot to unpack in that episode, but let's look that one up and watch it, huh? How about Cuba, Castro in the U.S. on CBS at 10 o'clock? This hour-long feature resulted from Dan Rather spending 5.5 hours with Cuban Premier Fidel Castro, Justin Trudeau's dad, touring Cuba and agricultural land, 2.5 more hours in an in-depth interview, and then another hour and a half in post-interview discussion. Dan Rather was around then. On Bonanza at 4:30, Joe and Haas try to unravel a sinister frame-up as Candy stands trial for murder in a distant town. Good Morning, Channel 8, I don't know what channel it would have been. A guest and features British actress Susanna York, blues singer Mose Allison. Sex-defined roles are discussed by nurse Kenneth Davis and author Phyllis Taub Greenleaf in a book, Liberating Children from Sex Roles. The remote crew with an exclusive visit to Robert Frost's New Hampshire cabin, cake decorating, and tips on sewing sweaters and shrinks. That Robert Frost cabin there is really, today would be considered a full-on house. And let's see, Good Times was on at 5 o'clock. 12-year-old Michael Evans thinks the standard IQ test at school is unfair to blacks and other minorities, so he walks out during the test. Michael's refusal to finish the test leaves him with a low score that jeopardizes his chances for higher education. I was taking some testing yesterday, some technology testing, and it was multiple choice, and I didn't know anything at all about what it was about. And I went through and I selected the random multiple choice answers, and I still scored 15% better than my peers. So you can guess on these things. That was really off track. Let's see, today on the Today Show, guests being interviewed are Gene Marsh, producer and star of the TV series Upstairs, Downstairs. I remember that one. That's pretty boring. Let's move on. Merv Griffin's show was Carol O'Connor, Marcel, and Joyce Gilson. Now, let's take a note here. 1974, the local hospitals would publish discharges. People that were being released from the hospital, they would put it in the paper right out there. So we know that on Monday, James A., Jeannie Albert, I won't give their full names out of respect because this is 1974. Linda A., Joanne A. of Turner, Suzanne C. of New Gloucester. And they didn't go quite so far as to say what they're being discharged from for their visit, but they certainly would throw that out there. So that's why our birthdays of the day, since they were announcing those as well in the hospital, let's say happy birthday to the girl that was born to Mrs. Warren L. Taylor Pond, Auburn, happy birthday. And happy birthday to the boy born to Mrs. Linwood Andrews, RFD2 in Auburn. Happy birthday to you today, on this day, 1974. If we roll the clock all the way back to 1902, October 22nd, 1902, we look at Greene, Maine, we had some local news. Adelbert Clark of Greene was picking apples on Tuesday, and his ladder fell upon his right hand, fracturing the metacarpal bone of the thumb. Now, when we get accidents reports today, do we get that kind of detail? We need to know when it's the metacarpal bone that is broken. Mrs. Ethel Sweat was taken ill Saturday night with appendicitis. Now, you all should know that she's improving this day in 1902. Erton Fogg is convalescent, so I guess he's getting better, or she. Wendell Philbrook spent Saturday and Sunday with friends in Auburn. And then L.W. Sawyer made a visit to Mr. and Mrs. Truman Shaw. Thought you guys should know that. Fred Gamage went to Lewiston on Monday. Mills was arrested. He was charged with the murder of Stanton, but the prisoner says his name is really Martin Stanton. He tells story of meeting an old man, and he knows nothing of the tragedy. They kind of threw this headline together to sell papers. It's from Patton, Maine, October 22nd. After a remarkably quick trip, considering the wood roads are in bad condition and the distance through the woods, Deputy Sheriff Barley arrived at Patton late last night with Mills, the last person seen with Martin Stanton. And Mills is charged with his murder. Stanton's dead body was found 35 miles from here last Sunday. The prisoner was working quietly at Tuzzler's camp at Scraggly Lake and made no resistance when arrested. He was placed in a temporary jail for the night. In an answer to a question from a reporter, he said, "My name is Martin Stanton, and I was born at Eastport, Maine." He persists that he is Stanton. Reliable patent people positively identify him as George Mills, who stopped here a short time about a year ago, and who last Friday, it is alleged, made several unsuccessful attempts to have cashed a time check from H.W. Marsh Camp for 72, bearing the name of Martin Stanton. So basically, Mills and Stanton wandered off from work, and Mills killed Stanton, said he was Stanton, tried to cash his paycheck. Mills, if that be his name, appears unconcerned at his arrest. The prisoner is a short man of slender build, is of dark complexion, and has not a bad face, but shifty eyes. He says that he is half French, an orphan, and has a sister about 22 years old in Boston. He can neither read nor write. And after claiming that his name is Stanton, he said he was on his way from the Marsh camp last Wednesday when he overtook an old man. They walked together about 5 miles and parted, according to Mills' story. The stranger struck into the woods, and Mills claims to have gone along the road. Mills says, "He told me he had dynamite and cartridges given him by the cook at the Marsh camp. This is absolutely all I know of the man whom I overtook. Until arrested, I did not know a murder had been committed." Mills appeared willing to talk, but made many contradictory statements and persisted in answering some questions more emphatically than others. He swore profusely while talking and nervously chewed tobacco. Mills is described as, say, 30 years of age, perhaps younger, standing about 5 foot 5 inches and weighing in the neighborhood of 153 pounds. His face is thin and long, while between the eyes there is a depression, as if the result of a heavy blow. His lips are extremely thick. His face is smooth, and while he has dark, curly hair and worn, when last seen, a small cap, his eyes are striking for their largeness, seeming to bulge right out of his head, as one man put it. There is an awful lot going on up in the woods in Patton, Maine, at that lumber camp. Now, in Lewiston, the police were indulged in a pig chase at Haymarket Square on this day, 1902. Officers Roach and Breen recently had an exciting time on the old Haymarket Square. It's not a fete day, but the officers seemed to consider it so, for they were there seen chasing a pig around the square to the delight of a large crowd. Someone present said they were doing their duty, and they no doubt thought they were. The pig was lost, and of course the officers did not want to have the poor lonely grunter running about the street abandoned to the ravages of the dog. It is said that Officer Roach first discovered the wanderer, and being a little timid about making the arrest, he called upon Officer Breen. The officer refused at first to assist him in arresting a pig, saying that he was not accustomed to it. Someone who was standing near said that when Officer Breen uttered these words, Officer Roach placed his hand upon his breast, as they do on stage, and said, "He stands between love and duty." Whether it was love for the pig or the pork, it is not known, but it was probably love of respect for himself or his clothing. Officer Breen insisted in his refusal to assist in the capture of the stray grunter, but when Officer Roach told him that he would enter a complaint against him for neglect of duty, he decided to enter the race. The pig, which was standing in the middle of the square when the officers charged, looked up at them in an unconcerned manner, and turning his little curled tail from one side to the other, he started to run. 2 or 3 boys in the road kept the pig from making an end run and a touchdown run up the street, and the people on the sidewalk kept him from entering any of the stores. A few moments after the chase began, a large circle was formed around the squeaking and grunting pig and the excited officers. The children kept up the chase for several minutes, and then, discovering they had gathered quite an audience, they decided to make one more stand and decide the affair for once and for all. The pig bucked the center between the 2 officers and got 7 yards. Then one of the officers, with hands extended, began to approach very slowly from the front, while the other began to approach more rapidly from the rear. The officer, who moved up from the rear, suddenly sprang forward, grabbed the grunter by one of the hind feet, and the arrest was made. At this point, someone in the crowd shouted, "Ring for the patrol." The officers thought, however, that the affair had attracted attention enough, so they paid a man with a job wagon to take the grunter to the station, where he has been christened Breeny Roach, after the officers who arrested him. The officers are looking for the owner, who may have the animal, by applying at the station. In case the owner should read this, it is proper that he be instructed not to call around to the station when the officers who made the arrest are present, or else they'll try to make him pay the pig's fine, which the officers say is $5 and costs for vagrancy. Let's see. On this day in 1902, Mrs. Jessie Canary of Surrey, Maine, picked a well-matured wild strawberry fully ripe last Thursday. Mrs. Simon Flood, living on South Surrey Road, suffered a paralytic shock on Saturday. She's able to be about the house, but she's still suffering from the effects of the shock. Mr. Frank Jordan came home from sea on Thursday disabled by what seemed to be blood poisoning in his right arm. The first deer killed in Surrey this season was shot by Mr. Ian Osgood near his field on Tuesday last week. Mr. Robert Holmes of Ellsworth passed through Surrey on his way home from a hunting trip one day last week with a large wild cat which he had killed near Rocky Pond in Orland. And in Newcastle, there was a meeting at the townhouse on Wednesday. It was voted to call a legal town meeting October 29th to raise a suitable amount of money for the 105th anniversary next summer of the town of Newcastle. And this was in 1902. Well, with all this excitement, let's go look at the Maine mammal of the moment. The Maine mammal of the moment is the right whale from the family Balenidae, any of the 4 species of stout-bodied whales having an enormous head measuring 1/4 to 1/3 of their total body length. And they're called the right whale because from the 17th to the 19th century, these whales were hunted for their oil and their strong, elastic baleen, and they were the right whale because they had the 2 blowholes, so they're easy, they're slow-moving and easy to see from far away. The name right whale refers to the bowhead or Greenland right whale and to the whales of the genus Ebolani, although originally only to E. glacialis. The bowhead has a black body, white chin and throat, and sometimes a white belly. It grows to a length of 65 feet, and about 40% of that is its strongly arched head. And 300 baleen plates line each side of the jaw. They filter the fish through that. Bowheads are restricted to the Arctic seas. They have a very restricted diet of tiny, free-swimming copepods, little shrimp-like crustaceans, and then snail-like mollusks. Structural specializations for this diet include the enormously long, narrow plates and fine bristles of their baleen and unusual skull modifications and arched upper jaw necessary to accommodate the baleen. The right whales were nearly exterminated by uncontrolled hunting. 2 of the 4 species are considered endangered. They're completely protected by international agreement since 1946. There are at least 10,000 bowheads and approximately 13,000 southern right whales, but northern right whales are only about 250 or 300 North Pacific right whales. The pygmy right whale is considered a close relative of the bowhead and northern right whale, but has been reclassified to a family of its own. And like the other right whales, it has a relatively long and narrow baleen, but also has a dorsal fin and possesses many unique skeletal features. It's an uncommon species found in temperate waters of southern hemisphere, not been well studied. Its population is unknown. I know we started out with the northern right whale and we ended up with the pygmy right whale, but they're all right whales, right? That's about it for a podcast today. Let's take a look at the National Weather Service forecast and we'll kick you out the door to go start your day. For today, patchy fog before 10 a.m., otherwise sunny with a high near 65. Calm wind becoming south around 5 miles per hour in the afternoon. For tonight, increasing clouds with a low around 41. And for Sunday, partly sunny with a high near 63. Showers move back in on Monday. And then partly sunny on Tuesday. Well, that is our podcast for today. Until next time, this is Downeast Mike, wishing you and your loved ones a day that is full of grace, love, and kindness. We'll see you. Come with me to the city. Play this gig tonight. We're gonna be the stars. Well, down the alley and through the side stage door to a sound check and then go have a beer. I hope to find some love tonight. Playing to this audience of one. We're gonna sleep in the van again. To play Maine's biggest bar. On the road with the new CD, all originals and some really killer hooks. And there's an agent here, been following us for years. She likes our sound, but she can't stand our look. You'll never make it in my city, boys, until you shave that facial hair. I'll get you fixed up with some earrings, and then we'll have to take it from there. Took this job in the nursing home. I like the hours and I really like the pay. Oh, when my mood is low, I'll think about that show. The time I got to play the Maine biggest bar. I hope to find some love tonight. Playing to this audience